Hello and welcome. My name is Naomi Lecomte, and I'm delighted to be sitting here today taking tea with my former tutor, Georgina Paul. Georgina was fellow and tutor in German at St Hilda's College from 2006 to 2025, coming to St Hilda's after 16 years in the Department of German Studies at the University of Warwick. Though, of course, as many of us know, she was also a student here. She retired last summer and is now an Emeritus Fellow.
Hello, everybody. It's a super pleasure for me to be sitting here with my former student, Naomi, and this is the second broadcast in the St Hilda's Time for Tea series. So hope you've got your tea with you, paused. Naomi and I were actually first years together, as Naomi came up in 2006 to read German and Russian ab initio, just as I was starting out in my new post. And I think being first years together is very bonding. You know, we don't know what we're doing at the same time. But it's also just tremendous that so many of you are attending online. I see many, many names there that warm my heart. So thank you very much for joining the call.
So we've got a few things to talk about today. First of all, we're going to be talking about studying modern languages at St Hilda's. We'll talk also about the special bond between student and a tutor that comes through the tutorial system. And in the context of falling numbers of people studying modern languages nationally, we're going to ask why it remains an important subject to study. A couple of housekeeping things. So there'll be a chance for audience members to ask some questions. So if you could just pop your questions in the chat, and then we'll ask a few of you to read those out when we come to the Q&A section. And lastly, this session will be recorded. So if you'd prefer not to appear on the recording, please switch your camera off and then let the development office know, and they can also remove you from the recording. So without further ado, let's get started. So Georgina, how did you come to study modern languages at St Hilda's?
Well, so I came from a London girls' school and made my application in the autumn of 1979. So first came through the kitchen door in St Hilda's in 1979 in December. Thought the first entry into the building, into South Building, I thought, I really feel at home here, want to be here. And then I did get a place, so I came up in 1980. I think what I'm going to call the Urszene of how I became a modern linguist actually happened when I was 8 years old. And I was in a park in Helsinki. So I was traveling with my parents. My parents are very interested in Scandinavia, and we'd been in a week where we'd been in Copenhagen and then Stockholm, and now we were in Helsinki. And I remember these two women walking past in the park, speaking very animatedly in Finnish. And I remember just pricking up my ears and thinking, oh, that's a really different language from the ones that I've been hearing earlier this week. I want to speak foreign too. So I spoke gobbledygook for the rest of the day just because I wanted to speak foreign. So I think that was important. The fact that I had those years before secondary school traveling with my parents was very important in making me very open to European languages. And then once I'd started studying German at school rather than, as well as French, I was actually the generation where we had some French at primary school. But once I started learning German, I preferred it to French. So it was going to be German always. And I had a very, very successful German exchange partnership through my school. I still am in touch with my German exchange partner today. So there I was going off at 14 and staying with this absolutely lovable German family who became like my second family. So that was very important. And then finally, the influence of a great German teacher at school, Carol Boothman. So thank you to Carol. I applied, actually, I was left without another foreign language because I didn't take French to A-level. I always thought I was going to read English, in fact. So I applied then eventually for German and Latin, but gave up Latin after prelims and did sort of German soul avant la lettre, so to speak. And my German tutor here was Hilda Brown, who I think will have taught some of the people who are on the call as well, who were here before. My students. She was an internationally renowned Kleist scholar, so Kleist was really important. And as we're going to talk about later, when we come to the tutorial bit, she was a very exacting tutor who made us read a great deal, though. So it really set me up well for my future profession.
Amazing.
Now, you grew up in France, didn't you? And then
Yes.
you moved to Germany. So
Yes.
you had French as your native language.
Yes.
And then began to acquire German.
Yeah.
But how did you come to apply here to study German and Russian?
Yeah. So I actually was originally set to apply for medicine, and I did rather well in my kind of mock exams in the language part, and so my teacher said, "Oh, you might want to consider modern languages," and I remember going on the Oxford faculty modern languages website and just having a moment of inspiration and just joy, thinking how exciting it would be to actually be able to study this. So that's how I came to apply. I understood that I needed a language pair, and I thought, as a native French speaker, doing French would be cheating. So there's that. And also my German was really good. I'd been studying it since I was 12 at school. And as you mentioned, I was living in Leipzig at the time. So it felt quite natural. And Russian, funnily enough, my dad got a job in Ukraine when I was about 10, and he decided to teach himself Russian in the car with cassette tapes. So the school run was full of these strange Russian phrases that he was repeating loudly. And so that came back when I came to think about my second language. And I thought, finally, I'll get to decrypt what he's saying on the phone. And I get to challenge myself with a new kind of alphabet. So that's how that happened.
And being a student of Russian ab initio, it meant that you spent your second year in Russia, which I imagine was a bit frightening.
It was, yes, confronting in some senses. But so at ab initio, you spend your whole year when you're doing Russian in a language school in Yaroslavl.
Not anymore, of course.
Not anymore.
No.
But at the time, there was a kind of seasoned tradition of going up. So that's 400 kilometers kind of north of Moscow. So the suburbs of Moscow in Russian terms. I came, I think, as many of us do, with a whole load of stereotypes and preconceptions about, in particular, the Soviet Union and kind of what that time had been like and what post kind of Soviet Russia was like. And yes, I realized in living there and making a life there and going through the kind of daily routines that you go through when you're somewhere for a protracted period of time, that actually it was much more nuanced, and all these kind of stereotypes started getting a bit dismantled. And I think it was and it continues to be, a really central part of the modern languages experience, that you can get to live somewhere and really experience it in a different way. So that was extraordinarily helpful.
We were talking yesterday about the fact that you go with sort of national stereotypes from the culture you come from, and then actually you learn that real life is full of difference and diversity, isn't it? And you don't have, an attitude that is the Germans' attitude or the Russians' attitude. You're learning about those differences and seeing different kinds of people. I think that's very, very important, isn't it?
I think you also see the stereotypes about yourself and your nation as well.
Very much kind of underrated aspect of being a modern linguist, that you start thinking about where you've come from. And you realise that it's a template. Which doesn't have to be the same way for everybody. So absolutely. It makes you question. So I know that you went on to do a master's degree at the University of Warwick. in international political, well, it was international politics in Europe,
Yes,
is that
that's right?
Yes.
Exactly.
And then you made a career in corporate innovation.
Yes.
And how did the languages help you with that?
In a bunch of different ways. So I originally thought, okay, I've studied languages, therefore I need to do something languagey, and was going to go to the European institutions as a good European citizen that I was, and did an internship in Strasbourg for 3 months that disabused me of that notion.
I should say, like many modern linguists before you.
Yes. So I wasn't quite sure how the languages were going to serve me. And then I actually came to this space of digital innovation, which is kind of largely tech-led. And I realized that not only did I have really practical skills, so I was able to conduct consumer research, for example, in a bunch of different languages. So when testing different products in different markets, that came in incredibly handy. But also, I think, learning languages gives you a really interesting kind of brain dexterity. And it helped me, I think German in particular helps you structure your thinking in a really clear way. And that's become incredibly important in the kind of work that I do, to be able to really clarify a thought, and explain it well.
It's organising all the subclauses.
Yes,
while talking. Yes,
it is, and you're kind of thinking and hoping that you'll land a verb at the end. So yes, that was certainly very useful. I don't think it's a big mystery what you went on to do.
Yeah,
but
I think I was fundamentally lacking in imagination. So I stayed at university. I must say I was a real literature geek, of course. So when I was an undergraduate, so I really enjoyed the reading and read a lot. So I wanted to stay with that. Really, I think that was a reason for carrying on. And also, actually, very importantly, I think it's very important in careers, isn't it? I remember Ulrike Horstmann, who was our DRD lector, and took a great interest in my wish to do a doctorate. And I had a session with her where she told me very vehemently that I was not to do it, and not remotely encouraging. And it made me do counter arguments of why I wanted to do it. So I stayed on doing that. But I did perceive the possibility. I don't think I probably would have been at peace with myself if I'd just gone on to study something that felt very historical in literature. And I was very interested in what was going on in the contemporary scene. And above all, I decided that what I wanted to do with my doctorate was to study GDR literature, East German literature, because I perceived this as a way of understanding the division of Europe with which I'd grown up, and to understand how the Cold War worked. So it was extremely important to me that the doctorate was going to be something that I was studying literature, but I was also going to East Germany and going over the other side of the Iron Curtain and learning that same thing. Actually very much resonates. Sort of, it's like what we said about the Soviet Union, going to East Germany and finding yourself disabused of all the things that you thought and you were being told, actually. Because of course the Cold War was an ideological war as well. We were all told all kinds of things about what the Eastern Bloc was like, and it was very important to go there and find out for yourself and talk to people and find, surprise, surprise, real people lead real lives. I learned to appreciate some things which I thought were very good about the East German system, about how people acted in great solidarity with each other, how workplaces organised, a great deal of camaraderie. That was good to see. People didn't have phones, so unless they were a Stasi agent, as I was later told, don't ring up so-and-so. The reason why she's got a phone is because she's on the Stasi. And so people would, I remember being, in a friend's kitchen, and people would just all come in after work to sort of call spontaneously. Really liked, I liked a lot of the feel of it. I was there in 1986 during a party congress, and then formed not such positive views about the way the regime went on, and the way the regime acted towards the people. So I could also see that because I was that element that was being introduced into East Germans going about their daily lives as a Westerner, and they were anxious about what might come with me.
Yes.
And you know, the fact that I was probably being looked at and watched over, and so one could sense the nervousness around them as well. Still, that was all very interesting. And I also spent a couple of years during my doctorate on a scholarship which took me to Hamburg, and they were also extremely formative years living in Hamburg. So that was the longest time in a block that I lived in Germany.
And you still have friends in Hamburg?
Yeah, they're very dear. They're very dear friends from that period. And, you know, we still keep up with each other, and I go over quite regularly. And as I always say, Hamburg is meine Heimat. Yeah. Lovely. Although, because I had the exchange partnership in Münster, you can tell from the way I speak German that I also had to do with Westfalen.
Wonderful.
Okay, so what makes a modern linguist, do we think?
I think there's certainly something around this ability to understand different cultures, this ability to break down different stories, different narratives. You know, we've been talking about stereotyping, and we've been talking about how actually spending protracted amounts of time in a country can help reshape those. So I think it makes us pretty kind of canny in understanding different people's perspectives and the kind of cultural relativism that kind of comes with that.
I think it also gives you a template of behaving, doesn't it? Of sort of, you know, it's not just that having learnt one language you get the idea of how it is you learn other languages, what it is you're looking for, and what kinds of structures can help you kind of get to fluency in that language.
Yeah.
But you're also, as soon as you're abroad, your little antennae are out, aren't they?
Yes.
Sort of, what are people saying to each other? How are they behaving in shops? What are they doing when they eat? You know, how are they behaving in families? What can I learn from all these gestures and codes? And I think that's really important as a kind of skill of moving around the world. And personally, I think this is probably the reason why modern linguists are right up there with sort of medics and computer scientists as the most employable graduates, because they have that, kind of intercultural ability.
Yes, agreed.
So, and incidentally, it's quite helpful for computing language as well.
Yes, I have formulated this theory that German in particular, with its kind of grammar, is quite useful for learning computing language. So I taught myself a little bit of Python, and I'm sure that the kind of German grammar logic kind of helped me be able to do that.
So on to the tutorial system. It's central to the Oxford education system, and perhaps we could reflect a bit on what it meant to us. We're a tutorial pair.
Yes, absolutely.
I know most of you think that your tutorial pair is you and your tutorial partner, and the tutor is outside of that. But actually, the tutor is part of the discussion. So I'm going to start off with my experience in the 1980s being taught by Hilda Brown. Back in that time, as I'm sure the 1980s folk online will remember, the point was to be extremely combative. So the tutor would have a very combative manner. My great friend Laura, who I think is on the call, remembers being taught by Karina Williamson and reading out an essay, and Karina Williamson began to say, well, don't you think that this and this and this is the case and you've got that wrong? And Laura began to agree with her. And Karina said, don't agree with me. And I remember one of my great memories of a tutorial with Hilda Brown is when I really, for the first time, really went for it in defending my view, which was, I think, at the end of my first year even.
Wow.
And I seem to have been reading the Wallenstein trilogy because it was, which I don't think I'd trust a first year to read now. So, heavens. And we had an enormous argument in the tutorial about Wallenstein as a tragic figure or not. And I was profuse with the effort of arguing, a counter view, and came out feeling as though I'd been in a terrific fight.
Yes.
And I think actually what those remarkable women who taught us back in the 80s were about was really trying to teach us to stand our ground. And if we looked as though we were going to be able to stand our ground, they'd fire at us more and more heavily. And it's quite a good thing to have learned.
Yeah, surviving fire.
But not the fashionable way of teaching now. And I think your experience will have been
it was.
Now I put
yes.
my hands over my ears.
I'd say so. The Russian and the German were quite different. I'd say the Russian was perhaps more in the older tradition, but with yourself, it was very different, and it felt kind of psychologically safe to kind of use the parlance of the day, and it felt unbelievably collaborative. And I think you'd kind of set the scene as we're all first years kind of together, that we were kind of both trying to explore and pull ideas apart and question and bring in. And it felt like rather than there is a correct answer that you must kind of work your way towards, it was just firming up, what is your opinion? Why do you believe what you believe, which I think is unbelievably valuable.
I also think what a lot of students don't realise is how equal the relationship actually is.
Yeah, agreed.
That a tutor can have their mind changed as well in the course of a conversation. I remember, the students noticing things like we'd been talking about Kleist Michael Kohlhaas, you and I.
Yes.
And I always thought that the ending of Michael Kohlhaas was sort of at last, it's a story about somebody who feels as though he's had an injustice done to him, and he's trying to get justice, and it just escalates and goes, up to state level, and then 2 states get involved in this attempt to get justice, and he's furious and he's burning down towns and things in the meantime. And then at the end, at last, he finds a person in authority who's willing to take him seriously, restores his maltreated horses to him, and he accepts from the Kurfürst of Brandenburg, he accepts the sentence of execution for all the things that he's done. And I always thought of this as kind of coming to a kind of conclusion, that sort of now we're in a good resting place.
Yes.
And you said, but that last moment where Kohlhaas, has this little act of revenge where he eats the prophecy.
Yes.
As he's standing waiting for his execution, he's got this little prophecy on a piece of paper, and he fixes the nasty Kurfürst of Saxon, who's hiding in the crowd. He fixes him with his eye and just pops this bit of paper into his mouth and eats it. so this person who's desperate for the prophecy doesn't get it. And you were just drawing my attention, as you've seen this become very important to me, that this closing point is not a closing point. It opens up again, and it leaves you a bit of the secret that the story doesn't give you.
Yes. I think it's interesting because endings can often reveal a lot about what the story was about in the first place. And it is set up as a sort of a harmonious kind of circle that they want to create. And that act of, I guess, literary rebellion, as well as the rebellion of the character, means that you look at everything that's happened and wonder, was it actually about justice, or what was
it about actually? Yes. And I think Kleist is brilliant in working with all kinds of ambivalences.
Yes.
Which is why he's a great writer to read today, I think. So it's also about learning from one another then, isn't it? And the tutorial is about learning how to persuade and to accept different opinions, and to learn from each other.
Yeah, I think I don't think it's an overstatement to say tutorials really taught me how to think, in the sense of how do you form an opinion, how do you deconstruct an opinion, what happens when that opinion is challenged, do you change your position, or do you kind of just get better evidence. And I was listening to Bell Hooks recently, kind of talking about cognitive dissonance and what happens when, our beliefs and our ideas are kind of confronted. And actually, I think tutorials provide a really healthy, the healthy way to do it, which is actually, I might need to change my mind on this, and that's okay. And I think particularly now, that sort of skill and that ability to change your mind and to make space for opinions to change is so in need and very relevant. So yes, extremely important.
I should also say it's always been very important to me, as far as I can control it at the admissions period, and you can't always control it, but to try and get as diverse a tutorial group as possible, because I also think that sort of, horizontal relations amongst the people in a year group, if you have lots of different types of people and from different backgrounds and with different nationalities and different experiences of being in the world, everybody learns from each other over the 4-year period. In that, the tutorial system is all you're talking about literature, or whatever it is, but you're also learning each other's attitudes. I think that's really important as well as a process.
Yeah, I agree. And shout out to the girls from my tutorial group. But I contrast that kind of space that the tutorial system kind of offers with my child who's 7, who's in primary school. And for all the kind of goodwill of the school, there really isn't much space actually for those differences and for her to learn about her own differences. And I can't help but wonder, if more education had a tutorial-esque kind of element, how great would it be for the kids to not actually fear their own differences, as well as those in the group.
And have the time, isn't it? It's having the time to develop who you are.
Yeah.
Also important, actually, I always thought it's important in Oxford that the assessment kind of comes at the end of the first year and then not again until the end.
Yes.
You've got lots and lots of time to experiment and do things that might be wrong if you were trying to do it in an exam.
Yes, absolutely.
Very good.
So we understand why this is important and what it's given us personally. Can you tell us a little bit about the state of modern languages nationally, but also here at Oxford?
Well, I'm sure an awful lot of people who have joined this call have joined because they're concerned about the state of modern languages teaching in the country. It's rather too often a negative news item. And I actually think it feels like a very threatening national context at the moment. In particular, in the autumn, it was very bad news to hear about the Leicester Modern Languages Department closing. I mean, there's been a sequence of closures, and it feels, being in the profession, it feels as though it's all sort of every week or every month, there's another department that we're all writing a petition to try and save. So Leicester and then Nottingham, and Nottingham is real, absolute golden department of modern languages in the country. So that was a real terrible blow. That feels as though the water is coming up through the floor now. And as an awful lot of people who were supporting the campaign to keep Leicester and Nottingham modern languages open were saying, if those departments close, there is no university in the East Midlands at which you can study modern languages now. And we're saying all the important things that modern languages gives you as a discipline. So it's very, very upsetting if people are deprived of that opportunity. We know about the falling numbers taking A-levels. In the summer, we almost always have articles in the media talking us through the statistics of the shrinking numbers. It's only Spanish that is growing. And I think it's also because a lot of schools are preferring Spanish as the language they teach. It's becoming difficult to find German teachers sometimes at school. I'm conscious of a couple of students over the last few years who've gone into Teach First. So, unable to use German as their language. So they would have, I'm thinking of French and German student. He could do French, but he had to learn Spanish the night before he was teaching Spanish to the people he was teaching. And somebody German in philosophy couldn't do German, had to do something else.
Right.
And so, there's the German is not being treated as a subject of importance.
Yeah.
Although the Foreign Office is saying it is an important language and it's something that we need. So we need a bit more support. I think one of the underlying problems about departmental closures is that modern language is a very expensive subject to teach.
Yeah.
Especially if you're learning languages from scratch.
Yeah.
You have to, you have to have classes every day.
Yes.
As you will have done when you were doing your Russian every day. Or every week through term, for a number of hours, and very, very intensive.
Yes.
And you can't really do that with a lecture room full of 150 people.
Absolutely.
And so it's labour intensive. Now, in Oxford specifically, just at this moment, we're in a relatively bad moment for modern languages at Oxford because there have been some changes in the way that departments are expected to budget. Modern languages has been running at a deficit for quite a long time, but that deficit was cross-subsidised from other places within the university. In fact, largely from the medical division, in fact, which is quite a wealthy division. So now what's happening is the Faculty of Modern Languages is under pressure to respond to the need to make budget cuts. So just at this moment where I retired, we thought that we had got through a replacement post for me.
Yeah.
And then right at the last minute, it hit the wall. And what we've now entered into is a phase of a 2-year freeze on all recruitment for modern languages in Oxford, while the strategy for the future is formulated. And it looks fairly certain from the current perspective that one of the things that will happen is that undergraduate numbers in modern languages across the board will be reduced. So the St Hilda's response to this has been to employ a 3-year career development fellow to cover the teaching of German language in St Hilda's. We've got 26 people studying German at the moment. So obviously we need somebody to look after them. And what we've decided we want to do is we're wanting to look out for support for the continuing teaching of modern languages in St Hilda's with a focus on what have historically been our lead languages of French and German still. Now, we've been told that to endow a tutorial fellowship in German, which is, as it were, if we could fund one completely, then it could get through. But it would cost the whopping sum of 3.5 million. That's covering the costs for the faculty side as well as the college side. Now, that feels like a huge sum and very unreachable. But Naomi and I have been talking about how resourceful and pragmatic St Hilda's people are. And we're hoping that there'd be ways of working collaboratively, maybe not to raise 3.5 million, but in essence, any sum that can help us with the support while we're having to cover the entire salary of the German teaching is helpful. So it costs around 70,000 a year with on costs to support that career development fellow. And do get in touch with the development office if you're interested, or if a collection of you or band of you are interested in trying to pursue some initiative. And this would come under the academic pillar of our current major Edge for Excellence campaign. I'd also just throw in the aside that it's worth considering support for schools liaison as well, which is a faculty post. We quite recently, because of the, as it were, the scare that's going on in modern languages, our schools liaison person who's been doing the job for 3 years was coming to the end of her contract, and the administrator thought she couldn't afford to renew this post. And so a bunch of colleges got together to provide the funding to keep that experienced schools liaison person in post. And I think that's really essential, really essential. An awful lot of people are out there saying, why do we need to learn languages in an age where everyone carries a smartphone that can translate instantaneously? But I think that's taking us back to what we've already talked about. It's not just the language, is it? It's a lot of cultural comprehension. And, I actually think it's crucial for the national economy that we've got to have, people from this country who are very happy in moving around the world and between different cultures.
Yes.
And arguably, I promised I wasn't going to mention the war, but arguably, tumbling into other people's countries without a huge amount of comprehension of how they might react can be saved by having teams of monolinguists around you who know about those countries and their cultural norms.
Agreed.
Right, I think now we've come to the point where we're going to take questions from the online audience.
Yes, that's right. So we've actually had some questions sent in advance. So we're going to start there. We're going to start with Emma Victoria Farr. So if you'd like to read out your question.
Hello.
Hi.
Well, I think my first question has more or less been answered, but I'll ask it anyway with a follow-up question. With ever dwindling numbers studying German to A-level, the question was whether there's still space for the subject in higher education. That was being quite well addressed just now, but perhaps the follow-up question, which is along the lines of what you were just saying, apart from the school liaison officer that you just mentioned, what can be done to encourage secondary school pupils to take up German in the first place beyond that?
Lovely to see you, Emma Victoria.
Thank you.
Wonderful face from the past.
Thank you very much. I live in Cologne, by the way.
Sorry,
I live in Cologne now.
Do you? There you go. That's a why do you study German? So you go and live in Germany. I actually think, I've said something about the Foreign Office has made it a priority subject for a little while, and I wish that there would be sort of more consistent messaging from government that this is something that's important. This subject is important to us. Modern languages generally, but actually German is also very high up in the list of languages that are looked for by businesses in this country. So, it's, in those statistics that you read, it's supposed to be one of the things that guarantees you greatest employability. What could be done to encourage people? I mean, Naomi and I were both saying it can be listening to tapes in the car, or it can be, being on a holiday and hearing a language you really don't know and thinking, oh, that sounds interesting. I would like to get up a bit closer to that. I think what's really important is to try to give young people the contact with foreign languages. It was interesting. We had a rather frightening dip in the number of people applying for modern languages generally, but German in particular, after the pandemic. And there was that moment of dread where we were thinking, is this the end of German? Is this now going into terminal decline? But actually the figures picked up again afterwards and are back to where they were around 2020 now in terms of the number of applications we get. And I think that can be put down to the fact that people didn't have the opportunity to get out, to go on that holiday with their parents, to have the super experience of, successfully ordering supper for their parents in the language they've been studying at school. Because it can be that, can't it? It's that thing that, I love doing this. I find this really exciting. I want to do more of this.
Yes.
But I also think that what's been going on, we've got this Oxford German network, which has been run probably for over a decade now by my colleague at Jesus College, Catherine Cole. And they do lots of competitions for schools. So they've got a massive network of, schools that they work with in this whole county and probably a bit beyond. Out there, they do essay competitions, so they do, stage things. So something, making a film for the little kids, or learning how to cook a German biscuit, or that sort of thing, right up to the more complicated essay competitions sometimes. And then we got a classic German prize, which was sponsored by a former student from Oxford who was really keen to promote the learning still of the classic text by Goethe or Kleist or whoever. And so each year there's a competition set, and you get lots and lots of people applying for modern languages who've done that. So I think this schools networking, schools liaison, giving people the access to the language, going on a German exchange. I know some schools don't want to do that now. It's become more difficult. But if you can do it, or if you can look for online opportunities for friendships that get you speaking that language and learning the difference, that's really important.
Our next question is from Claire Haynes. Oh, we will move on. Sorry, Claire. Next question is from George Mackenzie.
Hello.
Hi, George.
Hello, George.
Hello, good evening. Thank you both very much for the interesting conversation. My question was about getting your thoughts on the current state of the European project, but I might actually rephrase it, if that's okay, in light of something that was mentioned earlier by Naomi. What is it that you think, or could explain a bit more about, for modern linguists experiencing European institutions, what kind of views do people end up being disabused of, or what do they find kind of disillusioning about it? Thank you.
I can't. Yes, I can't kind of speak of all, right? I can only speak of my personal experience. For me, it was really a temperament thing. So I am someone who just likes to kind of get stuck in and get things done. And what happened during the internship was there was much less kind of sense of initiative and kind of proactiveness and a much slower pace than I was expecting. So I think I had, as you often do as a young person, a quite idealized sense of how the machine of the European institutions worked, and it was all very smooth and connected and all for the good. And I just was introduced into the friction of the world of work and realized that the sense of initiative of, for example, taking all these press releases and giving them the same format in the same font somehow managed to throw up a huge amount of discontent through a lot of different offices whose specific job and jurisdiction were those things. So I think for me, it was that I was not well suited to those sorts of things, and I went completely the other way to kind of tech and the digital world, which is, or certainly was at that time, in the grips of this, move fast and break things philosophy. And actually, it suited me quite well to be a lot more experimental and to really get stuck in. So it wasn't necessarily related to the European project per se, as more my particular temperament was much better suited to moving fast and breaking things.
I think that actually connects quite well to what I think about the state of the European project. In that I wanted to take a bit of a long run at this actually, and I think it was when the people I was at university with, when we all turned 40, we all began to realise that, born in the very early 1960s as we were actually children of the post-World War II era. So our parents talked about it quite a lot, their war experiences. And it wasn't, if you think 15 years ago, it's not all that long ago, is it? That was how near the end of the Second World War was to when, we were tiny children. And actually the European project was this great post-war project to try to maintain peace and promote prosperity. And my generation, were the beneficiaries of that, living in a Western Europe, at any rate, that was very peaceful and really pursuing connection more and more all the time.
Yeah.
And then this, that the moment where the Berlin Wall fell, and we were all weeping at the news, where suddenly, the Europe that we really were devoted to, especially having spent a lot of time on the continent, was then opening up eastwards. That was such an important moment. And I actually, the 2 years during my doctoral study when I spent in Hamburg, was financed by a Hamburg foundation, the Tutor Stiftung. And they were really very, very dedicated to the work of promoting good relations between young Europeans. So also very marked by the war experiences. They had to go through a phase of denazifying, when it came out, the extent to which they had been integrated into the Nazi Party. And they did that very bravely, as a lot of Western German institutions have done and did do. But the Töpferstiftung was then very intent on investing its time and its energy and its money into promoting good relations. And they had a lot of scholarships, and they would bring us all together. And I remember those, sort of weekends in Strasbourg, where you'd be there with, the Luxembourgers and the Dutch and the Germans and the French and the Brits and then the boys from Bratislava, after 1990, the boys from Bratislava and the Czech Republic and the Romanians. So, and really reaching out. And there we all were spending long weekends together, and people would come from the European Parliament to talk to us. And you thought this was a fantastic project which we were all invested in. And then the expansion of the EU to include those Eastern European countries, and then that awful Brexit moment, which felt like it's the beginning of the undoing. And I think where the European project is now, I think it's in quite a precarious state, because apropos move fast and break things. I mean, we're dealing with people who are supposed to be our allies, who are moving fast and breaking things and speaking a very anti-European language.
Yes.
I think the European Union has a lot of work to do to keep up. Yeah. And because that slow pace that you talk about, the European Union, because it's this extraordinary body of countries that are trying to agree with each other all the time, and it takes a long time to agree.
Yes.
They're so ponderous now, aren't they, in trying to arrive at positions which are going to be the common position.
Yes.
And I think we've seen, Hungary above all, and Poland pre-Tusk were very obstructive. And if we just play out what I think is quite likely to happen, I think that, if France has a presidential election next year, Le Pen might not be allowed to stand, but I think Bardella will have a good chance this time. And then if the next German election brings in AfD, and then you've got the two really core members of the European Union, which are no longer necessarily very friendly to the old European idea. So I think that's going to be a very dangerous moment.
Agreed.
Sorry to be pessimistic.
Well, Carolina Bax, you are responsible for cheering us up at this point.
Yes, please say something positive.
Hi, both. I was going to say slightly embarrassed about the amount of levity I'm bringing with this question. Thank you for the conversation so far. It's been very interesting. My question was, is there, really for Georgina, I suppose, is there...
It's for you.
Oh, yeah, for me, yes.
So is there a piece of literature, or I suppose a literary medium, that you've enjoyed teaching more than anything throughout your career? And is there one you like to annihilate from the Oxford?
Oh, that's tough. What have I really enjoyed? I suppose if I think over the whole Oxford career, I can remember teaching when I very first started teaching when I was a doctoral student. I was teaching Büchner to people, and I always think Büchner stays alive. Whether you're reading Wojciech or Danton's Tort, there he was writing in the 1830s, really, really young man, and he writes so excitingly that everybody I read Büchner with, we end up arguing about it and talking about it, but it really makes its mark. And, there are just some brilliant moments. I really love going in. There's just this scene right at the very end of the play in Danton's Tort where the character Lucille, her husband has just been executed. And she sits there and there are two terrible women who go past in the scene talking about how they thought he put up a very fine figure on the guillotine block. And then she says, long live the king. And she doesn't mean it. She doesn't want the king to live. She's saying long live the king because she doesn't want to live anymore and she wants to be arrested and to be put to death too. And that's such a brilliant moment because you kind of go into the play at this moment where somebody says something they don't mean. And like you said, you read from the end and you think, what does that tell us about what everybody says in this play? How much of it is rhetoric? So it's a brilliant introduction to rhetoric. So I think Büchner would be up there. I do think Kleist is always worth reading. As you all know, I absolutely adore Ingeborg Bachmann, and her novel of 1971, Malina, is my autobiography. So it's about this character called I, who has a male. She has this person she lives with who's called Malina, and you don't get the hang for a long time. You think, why is he there sometimes and why not other times? And and then gradually as you go on, sorry, I'm just going to spoil it for everyone who hasn't read it, you work out that Malina is her male alter ego. Mm-hmm. And Malina is the face she puts up in order not to be the vulnerable woman. Mm. Yeah. And I always think this is my autobiography. And it's a brilliantly, brilliantly written piece. And it's Bachmann's centenary this year. So she was born on 25th of June, 1926. So we should all be celebrating Ingeborg this year. What would I not want? I'm afraid I know that there are some students who are maybe on the call at the moment who will be hearing me say this. But didn't we all think that D.R. Loher's Unschuld was a very, very difficult prelims text to work with? And I do hope my colleagues are going to get rid of that soon.
Fingers crossed.
Not a very optimistic piece of writing either. So, and not huge number of lessons for life, I thought, in the end.
I've got time for a couple more questions, I think. So, Nicolette, you have a question for us?
You need to unmute, Nicolette.
Yep, you're still muted.
Sorry, unmuted.
There we go.
There we go.
Sorry about that. Yes, in my day, one of the papers in the English finals could be another language, could be French or Latin. So, for instance, I did French with Angelica Gooden. Mm-hmm. I wondered if this was still the case, but I noticed that Susan Jones also has a related question, which is that she's quite right about this. Those who study English literature find even a cursory knowledge of other languages essential. And so could there be some help enlisted from the English faculty? I think that's certainly true. And having languages when you're studying English, certainly linguistics, but also English literature, invaluable. Anyway,
yes, I think it's a really good point. And I suspect that, the English faculty has gone through, Sue will know more about this, but the English faculty has gone through, a great deal of curriculum reform. And my sense is that the students are under a great deal of pressure now with the rhythm of assessments. And so probably adding learning a language in would probably be quite challenging. But I'm also thinking, I think we got Jack Ford on the call, and I mean, I know you were of the generation, Jack, where you all went off and learned Yiddish. So Hannah and you learnt Yiddish together in that year. But I also am remembering that Jack, as an historian, history and German, you had the possibility of doing Latin in the second year. And then Lachlan went along with you as well. And that turned him into the medievalist that he is today, because he did Latin in the second year and then carried on with it during the year abroad. So I think that where the degrees have this possibility of adding in a language, it can be really transformative, be it ancient or modern.
Jack, was there something?
Did Jack want to say something? I've got him there too. I can see him now.
Yeah, I am here. I thought, I'm not sure if that's still offered, but I thought it was a fantastic opportunity to learn Yiddish as part of the course, and incredibly easy for a Germanist to learn Yiddish.
Yes.
But it sounds more impressive than it is, because you have to learn the Hebrew script. But
yes.
But once you get over that hurdle,
Jack, I have an abiding memory of you're getting caught in a terrible rainstorm on the way back from North Oxford in Yiddish, and we put your Yiddish homework on the radiator to dry.
You remember, yeah. And there was a very friendly American Jewish family who lived in Jericho, who took in the Yiddishists, and they were bringing up their children learning Yiddish. We were very, very committed to that, and very, very impressive. And welcomed us into their home, and it was a fantastic environment. It's
fantastic.
Really, really great memories from that period.
Yeah,
fabulous. Right, I think we have time for one last question from Charlotte Flotman. Charlotte.
Oh, can you see me?
I can hear you at the moment. Oh yeah, I see you down there. If you speak louder, then you'll get into the picture frame.
Okay, perfect. Can you hear me now?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, this is so exciting. I feel quite starstruck.
It's
so nice
super to see you.
Yeah, you too. And I think, I don't know if it's a question or a reflection, but for me, studying modern languages, I think, taught me about analysis and thinking about people and putting things together. And then obviously, as you know, Georgina, I went on to study psychology, and now that's what I love, and I get to do that in different languages. And I think there is agility, flexibility that comes with studying language that's really, really helped me. But on a personal level, for me, studying literature was what gave me so much solace so often. And I was wondering whether, this is for both of you, but whether you can name a piece of literature that has given you hope, maybe, because I think that's one of the reasons kids need to study language and need to be reading and need to be learning, because it can give them hope and a sense of perspective when the world is a really scary place.
It's a really, really lovely point. And it's really reminding me of a master's seminar that I did in my last year of teaching. I had quite a big group, and we were doing post-war, post-1945 women's writing. So we started with Marlene Haushofer for being a housewife in the 1950s. And then we took it up to, the most recent stuff that's coming out. But we'd had this stopping point over the really ghastly sort of pornographic, we'd had a seminar session on this very vicious pornographic literature from the early 2000s, which was so successful. Charlotte Roach's Feuchtgebiete, and Axolotl Roadkill by Helena Hagemann, and we were all sort of depressed to death by the awfulness of these things that we'd been reading. And we just stopped, and at the end of the seminar, I said, being as old as I am, I remember the age before the internet and before, when you could make a career by being absolutely scandalous as a writer, and you're getting the writers who wrote great poetry and they really accompanied you through your life. And that is the thing I hold on to, sweeping my hand around my book-filled study. I say, these are all my friends, they're the people who really, this writing can often be so sustaining. And that's very important to me. So I don't know if this is, it certainly used to be one of my Desert Island books. And it's actually, I wrote my doctoral thesis on Christoph Wolff. And Kynot Nirgends is my was a great favourite. And actually it became a book that was a central book in a friendship I had with an East German as well. Wow. So we talked about that, and it's just at the very end. How does it go? Begreifen, dass wir ein Entwurf sind, vielleicht verworfen, vielleicht wieder aufgenommen zu werden. And it was Christa Wolf at her lowest moment, and she's worked her way by the end of writing the text into a kind more positive position. She says, it doesn't matter if if I'm writing to change the world, maybe my work will affect people in 200 years' time, as I'm now picking up Kleist and Günter. And I read a lot of Günter's poetry around that time when I was reading Kynot Nirgends as well, and that became very important too. So you're right, it's really sustaining. You're absolutely spot on.
I'll give you my 2 cents on that one, which will be much less impressive than hers. But I remember we had in translation an excerpt from Flugasche. And it's, I think it's the opening part where she talks about the freedom that comes with madness and kind of basically non-conformity. And it's always kind of stayed with me, when you kind of have that bravery to just be other and be kind of different and take the unpopular position and sometimes be the hopeful, positive person in the face of a barrage of, really terrifying and terrible news. And I don't know, I just think about these kind of moments of madness and whatever kind of that means in the context, but where it can be a very joyful kind of madness that's kind of very freeing. And you're right, that's something that literature kind of does that nonfiction can't really do for us in the same way.
Yeah, Josefa Nadler, great character in Flugasche.
Yes.
Being spontaneous and jähzornig and having decided that she's inherited her main characteristics from her grandfather.
That's right.
Terrific. Is that a good note to end on?
I think
it sounds very optimistic now.
Yes.
So what do we say? Thank you very much to all of you for joining in this time for tea with Georgina Paul. Well, it looks as though we've just gone past 6 o'clock, so sun gone down below the yard arm. I think it's time for G&T now.
Yes,
isn't it?
Absolutely. Please join us wherever you are.
Thank you very much,
Naomi,
for coming on, and thank you to all of you for attending. It's been wonderful, the little snippets of conversation. Please email me, everybody.
Yes, stay in touch.